Hey, everybody, this is Lisa Harper, and you're listening to the Not Ready Yet Curating Conversations for the Aging Journey podcast. This is the show that changes the conversations we have with our loved ones about aging and life decisions. Let's have more honest conversations where we speak the quiet parts out loud. Today, I'm joined by Nicole Johnson, an estate planning and estate administration attorney who has spent her entire legal career helping families protect their legacy and navigate some of life's hardest moments with clarity, compassion, and a steady hand. Just when things feel overwhelming, Nicole has a real gift for making complex topics understandable and brings the human back into the contracts. Welcome, Nicole. Thank you so much for joining me today. I wanted to open up with what made you, I always want to know people's why,
Mm.
right? What made you want to become an estate attorney?
I chose this because I want to make sure that people's wishes and, as you just said, legacies are followed. People come to us with wonderful stories of their lives and their families, and you just want to be able to put everything in place and give them the comfort of knowing first that they will be taken care of by their loved ones or friends who they have chosen to do that for them, and also knowing that their affairs are in order and so that when they pass, that it makes the transition a little bit easier.
What does estate planning really mean? How would you explain it to people beyond, just having a will?
It's really about just like everyone says, have your affairs in order. So, you're talking about healthcare, powers of attorney, living will, a durable, which is a financial power of attorney. Those are really the core documents that you need moving forward.
And POA stands for power of attorney, and
Yes.
that's used while your loved one is still alive, correct?
Correct. Powers of attorney are only valid while you're living. So the durable power of attorney or your financial power of attorney, that gives you the opportunity to state who is going to handle your affairs while you're alive, but unable to do so for yourself.
Do you find families make that decision prior to knowing something's coming, or does it take sometimes like a medical diagnosis or a cognitive decline is starting
Yeah.
to assign that power of attorney? Or do you find a lot of families being proactive and knowing they want to put it in place even though there's no sign of any need of it?
It's really a mixed bag. When people
Okay.
come in, they're like, I need a will. I'm like, okay, great. We can absolutely talk about that. But let's talk about powers of attorney too. And a lot of clients ask, well, what are those? And do I actually really need them? And my response was
Okay.
always yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I mean, the way I see this is like, if you don't have these essential documents in place, someone else ends up controlling your assets, right? Somebody else is assigned to make those decisions.
So that's the hard part. So if let's say you don't like, you're an adult child, mom and dad get diagnosed with dementia or Alzheimer's and they've waited too long to get their powers of attorney done. At that time, they don't have the capacity to do so. So what happens at that time is whomever the child, let's just go with a child,
The adult child. Yep.
they would need to file for guardianship. And that is just a very emotionally and, you know, um, emotionally taxing on everybody involved and mentally because you have to basically go to the court and ask them to declare mom or dad incompetent because the court's going to take away their rights is really what happens, and it's expensive. There's lots of attorneys involved typically, and it's not a fast process either, and you have to keep reporting to the court every year because they want to make sure that you're handling their funds responsibly. So you have to report for every penny and you have to pay court fees every year. So I don't say this to scare anyone, but it's really just the what happens if these aren't
Yeah.
in place before someone doesn't have the capacity to sign those documents.
I want to normalize talking about planning for death and how it affects our families. And I want that. So that's one of the conversations I want to have. And the other one
Absolutely.
is we learn a lot through other people's stories, right? Like if we don't have to go through the same pain that another family that you assisted did. And so, yeah, I think the stories of what not to do are beneficial because I'm hoping that people learn from that and then they can hear this and go, let me talk to mom and dad. I'm not even sure what they have in place.
Exactly.
Um, a lot of people think a will is an end all document? What does that mean if your parent passes away with a will?
Okay. So there's two terms. It's called intestate and testate. So testate means you have a last will, and testate means you do not. Yeah, everyone thinks probate's a scary word. It's really not. The point of probate is if you're have a will, it is the person appointed to handle that is called the executor. So what the executor's function is to take all the assets that are in the decedent's name, the person who has passed, and to kind of put them all into one big pot. And then the executor will distribute it as that will states. Because nobody has the authority, if someone passes, to close that bank account that's in their name, right? Because the bank's going to say, well, who are you? Why, Joe Smith can't just come off the street and say, I need to close Jane Smith's account. They're going to say, well, we need proof that you have the authority to do this. So that's when the court appoints an executor for if there's a will, or if there's not a will, they appoint what's called an administrator. They function the same, it's just different terms.
So it still goes through the court. A will goes through the court either way. Would it be considered probate then for both of
It's
them?
basically you're saying you're probating the will, which basically means the court is taking the will and saying, yes, this is valid. And this person did do the steps required in order to make their wishes known.
Okay.
Court supervises the executor to make sure they don't mishandle funds, to make sure everybody gets what they're supposed to in the will, and to make sure expenses are paid. So creditors, your funeral bill, taxes. So it's really just an oversight of making sure that a decedent's estate is handled properly.
Okay. And so can we now transition into what a trust is and how that's different?
Absolutely. So
Okay.
a will and a trust both function as if they are your instruction manual for after you pass. The will, even if you have a trust, you're still going to have a will because you need to direct, like if you have a home, the will directs who now owns this home upon your passing. It can go into a trust or the or the or you can transfer the home into a trust during your lifetime. They're the same function, but a trust is private. So it's not going to be public record like a will is and all the assets that actually do go through probate. That's one of the functions of a trust is to put all your assets into one place to be distributed from the trust, and the trustee is the person who does that. Another function of a trust is if let's say, you want to leave things to your grandkids. You don't know how many you're going to have. Your grandkids may be young or they may be 18, but you're like, I don't want to give a good amount of money to an 18-year-old because we don't know what's going to influence them or what they're going to do with that. So instead, a trust can be used to limit what access that beneficiary, in this example, a minor, has to those funds. So as an example, we say the trustee can make discretionary distributions for that beneficiary's health, education, maintenance, or support. So anything they need, they can ask the trustee for. So if they needed braces, they needed tuition for college, books for college, they needed a car, a computer, the trustee has the discretion, if you wanted to make those decisions for the beneficiary. Other than that, we're going to set specific times or ages or scenarios in which the beneficiary actually gets cash in hand. So, for example, we can say at 23, let's give you 10%. At 26, let's do another 30%. At 30 years old, we hope that, you can make financially sound decisions. So we'll give you whatever's left of it at that time.
Okay. And so there's a bit more, way more thought involved in like pre-planning
Mm-hmm.
on behalf of others that, you're leaving behind in your family, it sounds like.
Right.
If there's no will, that's a different thing. And you were talking about how expensive that can be. I know the trust to establish it, people think, oh my gosh, I have to spend this money.
Mhm.
But in my way of thinking, and I think I've heard other people say, you either pay now or you pay later.
Exactly.
So if you pay now and you set up a trust and you have that knowledge and, they're sitting there with you writing all these, I'll call them directives. I don't know if that's what they're called, but
Mhm.
on how things are going to go. you're spending that money up front, but you have complete control over your assets.
Powers of attorney, again, are while you're living. They're super important because let's say your daughter applies to be your guardian and the court can say, I don't care that you're her daughter. We're going to appoint an attorney to handle her finances because we think that maybe, you're not responsible enough. Maybe they didn't present well. So
Do they almost have to interview for this?
you have a hearing for it, and you have to
Mhm.
prove to the court why you would be a good choice to handle your mom's finances and her healthcare decisions. The court does
Wow.
not have to appoint you just because you apply.
Okay. Yeah, and if you've got siblings, I can see how that can become
Yep.
a bit, yeah, emotionally dynamic very quick.
Yes, especially if
Yeah.
they're not on the same page. There can be arguments.
Yeah. Yeah. So in the hierarchy, to have a will is better than nothing. The next level is the trust, correct?
Mm, I think powers of attorney are the most important, to be honest, because that's why you're living. After you pass, you're leaving things someone's going to inherit regardless. But while you're alive, you want to make sure who you want makes those decisions for you.
Different powers of attorney for healthcare, for finance.
Yeah, the house is going to fall under financial power of attorney. And then basically it's healthcare power of attorney and then everything else.
Okay. And so it sounds to me like you're putting just this great emphasis on the power of attorney, which, I think so many people focus on the when they're not here anymore
Mhm.
part of it.
Exactly.
To be able to think and go, I trust my son, to make all of my medical decisions. I mean, prior to doing that, you're having hopefully some real open, high level conversations with that son.
Right.
When do you lead people and help them through that discovery if they come to you and go, I know I need a POA, but I don't know, who to choose, or is that something that you guys get involved with?
Absolutely. We'll discuss family dynamics and talk about everybody's personality because you may have three children. A lot of people are like, well, let me just name the oldest. Well, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Your oldest may be, um, very emotional. So you may not want to have them as your healthcare power of attorney if they're not going to be able to actually make decisions and be wishy washy, or let's say they have very different beliefs than you and you want your end of life choices followed. You want to make sure those people are going to honor your decisions.
Yeah.
And let's say some people just aren't great with finances, they just aren't like money people. They're sometimes late on their bills. You don't want those people to be your financial power of attorney. You want to choose somebody who's good with deadlines and, can follow your instructions on, well, if I need money for my care, I would prefer you liquidate this account first. So have the discussions on how you need things to be in the future.
Yeah, and I mean, these are so sensitive conversations with your family members,
It
with your
is.
parents. The conversations we have at this level later in life, they're not yes or no. They're not questions that you call somebody and go, "Okay, that's the answer," and hang up.
Mhm.
Do you find even in your practice that you're noticing with, cognitive decline and dementia becoming that somebody can now be a POA for quite a long time in somebody's life while they're still alive.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are some of the things you've seen come up with that? And can you give any guidance on, trying to pre-plan for something like that that is
Yeah.
so unknown?
So if people aren't married or have lost a spouse or maybe don't have kids, one of my concerns is if they name their brothers or sisters or cousins, those are people in the same generation. So God forbid something happens to all of the people who you've named, then you have to go through that guardianship process anyway, even though you have planned. So I always like to you can name as many people as you want in this specific order, um, A goes first, B goes second, C is named third. And as I would love to have people at other generations somewhere in that line so that,
Yeah.
you want to make sure that you live to be 100 and maybe your brothers and sisters don't. You have someone who can step up for you.
Gosh, yeah, because if you were in that process, I mean, years and years as somebody assigned and something happens to them, to have that backup.
Yes, yes, you want to plan for A and B, but let's talk about C and D just in case.
Since we've brought up dementia, for those listening that are, maybe there hasn't been a diagnosis, but there's been some changes and
Mhm.
people are starting to have questions. What is your best guidance? What are the next steps to take? What do those conversations look like?
I know it's really hard to have those conversations, but the alternative to that and not building up the courage to have those conversations, like I said, are expensive and emotionally and mentally draining on everybody. So what I would suggest is if you need to speak to your parents, unfortunately bring up a worst case scenario or phrase it as if a story they heard. So you could say, Mom, my friend was telling me about how their parents didn't have their powers of attorney in place, and it made it really difficult for them to help when speaking with doctors because of HIPAA and assisting and paying bills when the time came. Like, do you have any of these things in place? So, that's one way to approach it where you're not putting them on the spot. You're kind of like, hey, I heard about this. What are you thinking?
Yeah. And I know a lot of adult kids are going, I want these in place for myself right now, And so some people are actually going through the experience themselves and then circling back to the parent
Yeah.
and being like, hey, I just did this. Have you done that? Or I'm really trying to open up this dialogue for families that are like that. That are like, we don't even know. We
Mhm.
don't even know what they have, what's been established. I'm going to go do it. Do you want to do it together?
Yeah,
Do
that's
you
a
want to
great way to approach
yeah,
it.
like, let's join arms together and do this.
We
Yeah,
have that happen. It's not every day it happens, but it's not like it doesn't happen.
yeah. Oh, and you brought up HIPAA. Some of these built-in institutional, roadblocks
Yeah.
that could come up and appear if things aren't in place. Could you give us a brief, I mean, just I think most people are familiar with HIPAA, but what does that equal in your world?
So it's just the privacy, which I understand because like we were talking about with the banks, Joe Smith just can't come into the bank and say, I want to close Jane Smith's account. Just the same thing. You can't walk up to the doctor and say, I need her medical records. Well, what authority do you have or permission do you have to get this person's medical records? Even though you're trying to advocate for them, there are going to be significant roadblocks where you just don't have the authority to get that information.
Yeah, it's the legal authority to be able to proceed on
Yeah,
behalf of.
very
Yeah.
nicely said.
Well, thank you. Yeah, there's so much out there that you really just need an expert on what fits our family. What does this look
Mhm.
like? Because I've heard some people say, well, I don't need a will. And it's like, do you own anything? Do you owe anything? Like, it's like the OWE or the OWN.
Right. Yes. So, even when children they turn 18, I don't think they need a will because they probably don't have anything. I certainly didn't when I was 18. But powers of attorney would have been a great idea because once you turn 18, mom and dad don't have the authority to make healthcare decisions for you anymore. God forbid somebody gets in a car accident
Yeah.
and you don't know what's going to happen and just taking that, hour or so with an attorney to get those things done is just it's worth it.
So
Right.
if I were to come to you, what would you suggest? What are those documents that at I guess the minimum standard
Mhm.
that people should have in place?
Well, as we've discussed, the healthcare power of attorney, a living will. So those are your end of life choices, like whether or not you want breastfeeding or breathing tubes. Those can be combined into one document called an advanced medical directive. You'll have your financial durable power of attorney and a will at the minimum. If you need a trust, the attorney can discuss with you what are the benefits to it, and really, do you need the cost of um, having a trust? Because there are
Okay.
other ways to get around having to go to probate with your assets. Because the trust can protect assets from going through probate, but there's other ways to get around that as well. No, like, our firm and a lot of firms in the area, most, if not all, that I know do it on a flat fee basis. So,
Okay.
from the start, like, what you're getting into.
Okay, so this flat fee for these main documents that are going to cover a lot of things we're saying to just have in place so
Mhm.
that you have protection and the people in your life that you want to be making decisions for you are in the know and they're identified legally for that
Right,
authorization. Should something happen? Because all of this is the only thing that isn't a should is that eventually we know death.
right,
We don't know when,
yeah.
but the rest of it is should you need the power of attorney? Should you need the healthcare power of attorney?
It's better to have it and not need it, and need it and not have it.
Yeah, 100%. Uh, I will take a moment and thank listeners. If you've made it this far, about 30 minutes into this episode, I just want to thank you for being here and still listening and, caring about what's going on with your family. Because again, this is all about curating those conversations. And I'm hoping that you're able to get some golden nuggets that you can take and that this just facilitates conversations with your families to make those hard decisions. So thank you for being here. We have listeners really outside of the US
Mhm.
too, and I'm not sure about that. So they're going to have to check with their whatever that equals. And
Right.
even statewide, I will say Nicole's here in Charlotte with me. So we're in Charlotte, North Carolina. State guidance and all of those things, that's different wherever you are. But for the most
Absolutely.
part, these high level documents, we call them all the same thing, right?
Yes,
Okay. Yeah.
yes.
So I know I have picked up the phone to call you or send clients to you sometimes with this, with the parents wanting to add their kids, the adult kids, to the deed of the
Yes.
house. Can we talk a bit about that
Y
and give us some high level thoughts, what that equals, best practices? Maybe it's a myth that that's something you should do because it's out there.
yeah.
So, what is that guidance for adding your kids' names to the deed? What do people think that that's going to
I
achieve?
think they think it's gonna make it easier when they pass away, and while it could make it easier for the transfer aspect, it's not really great for taxes. I'm not a tax attorney, so I'm just gonna caveat that, but inheriting things is always a lot better because you're gonna get, what's called a step up in basis. So just for easy numbers, if, your mom bought the house for $100, and when she passed away, it was worth $200. And then when you sell it for $250. The capital gains on that, and I'm sorry if I'm using the wrong terms again, not a tax attorney, that you're paying taxes on that $200 to $250 if you inherit it. But if your mom gives it to you or puts your name on the deed, you're gonna pay a lot more in taxes because you're not gonna get that step up from the 100 to the 200.
Oh,
And that's the same for stocks as well. Um,
like the difference between the
Mhm.
value of when they began ownership of it to the value of when it sells.
Exactly.
That's a big difference versus today taking it at market value and then it sells.
Right.
That difference is usually a big
Oh, yeah,
difference,
especially if they've lived in the house for 30, 40 years, you know?
which that's a lot of times who we're talking about.
Right.
Yeah. So the kids' names on the deed, get guidance.
Yes,
This isn't meant for to tell you what to do.
correct.
Get guidance, talk it out with somebody that's in your local area, but understand the tax ramifications, what that means. Yeah. So
I will.
that one is a big one.
Another big one is the banks will say, just put your kids on your bank accounts. Do not do that. And this also would happen to the house as well for liability purposes. So, I'm talking to mom and dad and like, well, we'll just put our daughter on the account. Okay. I'm sure, for example, your daughter's a wonderful driver. But if she gets into a car accident and someone sues her, if she's an owner on the house, she's an owner on your bank accounts, guess what? Those are subject to any judgments against her. So we
Oh,
don't want to have kids have ownership of mom and dad's things and vice versa.
wow. Yes. Because it could be pulled in a way that you don't expect.
Exactly.
Oh, wow. Everything is so digital now. What about, like, having digital logins and stuff? Do you guys guide on that as well?
So typically it depends on the situation. If, sometimes mom and dad are like, I don't want to do it anymore. Like,
Mhm.
you take over. Here are my passwords. Have at it. And other times it's, no, I think I'll wait a little bit until the time comes. So every scenario is going to be, based upon what's going on with the family and mom or dad's, capacity at that point too.
Yeah, we talked about dementia and capacity a little bit.
Mhm.
Dementia is it's hard to watch somebody go through. It's very scary for all
Yes. So
involved.
it's a horrible disease.
Like, what does legal capacity really mean? And is it only in a case of cognitive decline that somebody would be losing the legal capacity? Could you explain what that means to our
Yes.
listeners?
So, you're really looking at a very just basic level. Do these people understand why we're talking about these documents? First of all, like when you come in, some people are like, I say, "Oh, do you know why you're here?" "No, my kids just brought me here." I said, "Okay, well, are you interested in having a financial power of attorney?" And we can talk about it. And then sometimes I'll go off topic for a second and I'll go back and say, "Hi, so do you remember what we were just talking about?" And they'll say no.
Mm.
So, you know, when someone can't really understand that short term, like 5 minutes, 10 minutes later, it's hard to say, yeah, I don't think they can. Other times, we'll have people come in with a diagnosis, but they just got the diagnosis. So they're still sharp, they're still there. And sometimes it's you can't sometimes I think yes, but just to be safe, let me have your doctor write a letter stating that you do have capacity because
Okay.
that's gonna, God forbid, let's say children don't get along and one says, well, mom didn't have capacity. You say, well, actually, the doctor said so, and the attorney believed that she did. So, because I'm not gonna let a client sign something if I don't believe they're in their right minds to make that decision.
So you're checking that as they're there. That's why, the emphasis is on being proactive and planning ahead, avoid that situation altogether, right?
Exactly.
Is there anything that we would be remiss if we didn't mention it today for our listeners?
I just want to going back to having that difficult conversations with your parents. A lot of them will say, "Well, I don't want you in my business until that time, so I don't want to do it right now." Healthcare, you'll always be able to make your healthcare decisions so long as you can effectively communicate them. So it's not like they're going to take that right away from you. And another thing you can do is in your financial power of attorney, you can express that your agent, the person who you've named, does not have the authority to act for you unless a doctor certifies in writing that you are unable to handle your financial affairs. So
Mm.
you can input this level of making sure um, that they're just not going to step in and take over. There is going to be a
Right.
barrier there.
Right. It's only going to be when necessary,
Exactly.
not beforehand.
So that's, something you could bring up to mom or dad and just say, well, we don't have to do that. It can be in place right now, but just doesn't have to be active at the moment.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a good point. So, yeah, any advice we got for the adult kids to start having those conversations. And I always say the podcast is not ready yet because people say that all the time. Well, I'm not ready yet to do that. I'm not ready yet to have that conversation.
Yeah.
And there's like I feel like there's so many documents, but there really aren't. There's a handful that are very important that function and operate at a high level that just should be in place.
Right.
And if there's any other kind of, amendments or accessory documents, a state attorney will guide you in the right way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
When if your parents are saying I'm not ready yet, a lot of that is fear based and it's finding a way to ask the questions. We're like, gosh, when we were home for the holidays, does something concerned you? You're not saying anything about it. Like,
Yeah.
we have got to get those voices out of ourselves. We have to be vulnerable and put it out there and start the dialogue. And the first time, it may not go great. It may be a shutdown or I'm not ready yet. You may hear that,
Yeah.
but you keep approaching.
Yeah.
They are going to be a process. So I appreciate you ending with that. I've been doing a fun lightning round. Are you willing to play
Sure.
as we wrap it up here? Okay. And again, thank you, Nicole.
You're
Appreciate you
very
so
welcome.
much.
Thank you for having me.
So, first question, one document everyone over 18 should have.
Both powers of attorney.
Both powers of attorney.
Yes.
Yes, which is durable and healthcare.
Yes.
Yes, I feel like I just won the quiz. What is the biggest estate planning myth?
Oh, that if you don't have a will, the state will take your money.
gosh, yeah. What is one phrase you wish families would stop saying?
There's no reading of the will. That's not really a thing.
Okay, no reading of the will.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I said other states might do it, but that's not something we do.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and yeah, caveat, we're in North Carolina
Right.
again.
Yes.
And the last one I think I know, this one's more fun. Beach day or golf day?
Oh, both. I don't know.
Golf at the beach.
It
We
dep
can combine.
yes.
Man, and okay. Do you wanna touch upon those real quick?
Yeah.
Okay. So the first one was, if you don't have a will, the state's gonna come and take your money?
Right.
Okay. Tell us that doesn't happen.
No, so the state only comes after your estate in the event that you were on government benefits like Medicaid and Medicaid was paying for your care. When you pass away, Medicaid is going to say, okay, we paid for your care for X amount of years. Whatever you have left, we would like to be paid back from that. That's the only time the state is going to come for your assets. Beyond that, like if you don't have a will, the law is going to state who inherits. So for instance, if you didn't have a will and you had 3 kids, it's going to say everything goes equally to those 3 children if you didn't have a spouse. If you did have a spouse and let's say 3 kids, because that'll make it easier. So if you have a spouse and 3 children, then your spouse is going to get the first $60,000 of personal property. So let's say cash or anything that's not real estate. And then everything else is going to be split where the surviving spouse gets the first third and the other 3 kids in this scenario will split the other 2/3. So just
Okay.
because you're married, it does not mean that if you pass away, your spouse gets everything.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, that's important too. But okay, so now I'll wrap. Well, Nicole, thank you so much again. It was such a pleasure having you. You've been a wealth of information, and I hope that we've cleared up some things today with your help. So, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. And anytime you need me back, I would be happy to have another discussion with you.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. Thanks for joining me on Not Ready Yet, Curating Conversations for the Aging Journey. If something in this episode gave you clarity or the courage to start an important conversation, or offered a new way to look at things, I hope you'll share it with someone who might need the same encouragement. Remember, navigating aging isn't something we have to do alone or in crisis. With love, logic, and the right tools, we can face what's next with confidence and connection. Be sure to follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you're feeling generous, leave a review. It helps others find the show. And just a quick note, the information shared on this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for medical, psychiatric, legal, or other professional advice. Always consult a qualified professional for guidance tailored to your unique situation. This is Lisa Harper, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.